Hello and welcome to Cerhi Half Hour. Cerhi, by the way, stands for the Center of Excellence in Reproductive Health Innovation, University of Benin. Cerhi Half Hour is a collaboration between the NTA and the University of Benin, and the program attempts to answer questions on issues of health, gender, family, maternal mortality and morbidity, as well as development generally. For today's program, we are focusing on the importance of gender equality for development, and we're glad to welcome to our studios a foremost and internationally acclaimed gynecologist obstetrician whose enormous work has propelled the University of Benin beyond the shores of Nigeria. And so join me to welcome Professor Friday Okonofua, Center Leader of Cerhi. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We also have in the studio, co-anchoring this program with me, another expert in the field of medicine, Dr. Wilson Imogan. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Benny.
And so I'll just take the first shot by asking Professor Okonofua, Cerhi, what is Cerhi all about?
Thank you very much. As you explained earlier on, Cerhi stands for the African Center of Excellence in Reproductive Health Innovation. And that's a special program which came into being through competitive application for grant from the World Bank in 2014 to the University of Benin. And the major objectives of Cerhi is to build capacity for implementing reproductive research and program in the field of reproductive health by training, doing short courses in reproductive health, master's and Ph.D. programs in the fields of obstetrics and gynecology, reproductive health, public health, nursing, and health economics. And recently we are adding maternal and child health into that program. So Cerhi is a very focused program, and our goal is to train people from the West African region to enable them better understand the principles of reproductive health so that you can go more deeply into development for the region. So far, we've admitted students and trained students and actually graduated students from several African countries, including Ghana, Nigeria, Guinea, Gambia, and Malawi, and many more are currently registered under that program.
Thank you, Prof. Perhaps Dr. Imogan.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this program. We appreciate Cerhi, particularly, and the University of Benin for collaborating with NTA for us to know about Cerhi. Most times we have programs going on and we don't know anything about them. How do you recruit your students?
Well, the program, like I said earlier on, is one of sub 53 programs across African countries, about 23 of them in Nigeria. And basically, even though the program is facilitated by Cerhi, it is actually in a university program, so that all of the procedures for admitting students follow the same procedures that the University of Benin uses in admitting masters and PhD students. The short courses, we advertise them, and then applicants come from various parts, and they are most of the time hybrid, both face-to-face as well as internet-based online programs. So we know that admissions, the courses are being accredited by the National University Commission, for example, masters and PhD programs, as well as by several international organizations such as APIA, Agency for Public Health Education Accreditation, has, for example, accredited the programs. And therefore, it enables us to have access to students internationally, regionally, and nationally. So we use the same framework that the University of Benin uses in admitting students. It's advertised to the university websites, and the students are asked to go there to apply. So if you go to the website of Cerhi now, and also the University of Benin, you will see advertisement for these programs in both of those networks. both of the websites, and then you can apply according to how the university does it. So it's a university program, but facilitated by Cerhi.
All right, Prof. Whereas the Center for Reproductive Health, or whereas the issue of reproductive health is not gender biased, I know that Cerhi, for example, focuses more on women. And we're talking, with regard to this program, on the importance of gender equality for development. Recently at the National Assembly, the bill on gender equality was shut down. Not even the modification of the bill to read equity and all that, was good enough for the bill to continue, the process of being passed into law. Was it gender bias that could have been responsible for what happened at the National Assembly? How do you look at what happened, sir?
Thank you very much. Gender is a very important principle for Cerhi, both in terms of how we recruit our staff, as well as how we receive and recruit our students. Today, about 50% of our staff are women, and as a matter of fact, more than 50% of our students are also women. We take gender very, very seriously because it is underpinning development both nationally and internationally. And therefore, apart from us being gender sensitive in the recruitment of what we do in Cerhi, we also ensure that we teach our students all the principal agenda. One of the major courses that we offer in Cerhi, both short master's and PhD programs, is not only gender, but integration of gender in all of the programs that we do. So, because we believe that very significantly that there's very poor understanding of what gender means within the context of our country. And today, Nigeria is doing poorly as compared to other African countries in terms of positioning gender as an essential issue of development. I can say that when we talk about gender development or gender positioning and integration, Nigeria is one of the lowest countries in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of inclusion and integration of gender into its decision-making processes. So for what happened at National Assembly, I think it's mainly because of poor understanding of what gender means for Nigeria. I think that is why it happened. But I do believe, and I'm happy, that the National Assembly is trying to reverse itself. And I think therefore that means that organizations like Cerhi should do more work in educating everybody in the country about gender and gender issues and the importance of gender mainstreaming in all of the things we do. Because, it simply means if we decide not to work with women and integrate them into whatever we are doing in this country, it simply means that Nigeria is clapping with one hand. And when you are working with one hand, you can never get results. Remember that MCO Abiola talked about clapping with one hand, which is almost impossible. So if we are still women, it simply means that we are not involving all of the capable hands that we have in the country in our developmental planning and implementation. And from what I sit here, I haven't lectured in university for several years. And in terms of how women perform in whatever we do, women are as good, in many instances, even better than men in some of the issues that we discuss about. So I don't think men should be afraid. And I think if we decide not to exclude women, we're actually punishing Nigeria, because it means that the results of development that we expect will not be achieved anytime soon.
Thank you very much, Prof. We always hear gender, 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 and gender mainstreaming. Prof, for the lay public, what is gender?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's very important to understand what gender means. Gender doesn't mean man or woman, because when you want to differentiate between man and woman, you use the word sex. A man is a man, a woman is a woman. But when you are saying gender, you are talking about how society looks at the relationship between a man and a woman, how that society perceives that relationship, how they understand the engagement of men and women in many of the things that the society does. So that's what gender means. It's not, so when you use the word gender, it doesn't mean women, it doesn't mean men, it actually relates to how our society, for example, Nigerian society, looks at that relationship and how culturally we've lived over the years understanding. Gender is being understood increasingly as fomenting a good relationship and understanding equality between men and women. Because in terms of biology, men and women are equal. Therefore, in social domain, men and women should also be treated equally, and that's what gender equality means. And anything less would undermine our national development.
Therefore, Prof, how do we address the issue of gender bias, which you have elucidated brilliantly? What gender means, man and woman, but how do we address? Because you have given lectures, I'm aware, you have written papers, and the issue of gender bias still remains. How do we address that fundamental fact of gender, both in the family and in the development process?
Thank you very much. I believe very strongly that the government has a leadership role to play in this regard. Because the truth is that when you talk about gender bias, there is often rivalry between men and women. And even between the women folk, there is rivalry between women and women. And also rivalry between men and men. And the reason that you have gender problems is because there is rivalry, and therefore men want an opportunity to eliminate women so that the competition would eventually rest between men and men. But when you now locate that competition between men and men, the rivalry is even more fierce. And therefore, in order to promote what I call equal development and equity, the government must have a policy and a program that ensures that everybody is treated equally, both men and women. And it is a government. In fact, when you talk about how do you manage it, the government has the most important role to play. Because if a government decides, for example, that in their own decision making and all that women should be included in terms of political processes and political representation, in terms of the number of women in cabinet, parliament, that will happen. But if a government decides otherwise and they begin to banter here and there, and when I mean by government, I'm talking about executive, legislative, and even the judiciary in these terms. So that the government in the executive arm should be able to appoint equal proportion of commissioners for men and women. And in the parliament, the parliamentary structure should be such a way that we have equal representation, or nearly equal representation of women in parliament. And one of the ways in which you currently measure development in both developed and developed, the extent to which women are included in the decision making. A country like Namibia or Rwanda have almost 50-60% of women as ministers. And recently I went to Rwanda and I was amazed that the conference we went there for was mainly organized by women. I actually shed tears in private, seeing how women were everywhere, dictating the pace at that conference. Whereas in my own country, Nigeria, we hardly see women doing such things. So I really want to say that the government, and I say specifically, national, states, and local governments have a role to play in ensuring that they protect the rights and privileges of women according to international, international doctrines, and they have signed to the equality of all persons. We all signed to should be protected by governments of this country.
Okay, Prof. We're looking at Nigeria. Policy makers, decision makers are men. How readily do you believe, looking at the status quo, how readily do you believe that men would want to shift grounds for women? Especially you've mentioned, in the course of your address that men should not be afraid. What really are they afraid of, Prof?
Well, I think let me use the word, the men who are not sure of themselves, who are not sure of their agency and power, they should be afraid of women. That's the truth. Because I also know a lot of men who are not necessarily afraid of women, who will protect women and give them their rights if they find themselves in office, and so on and so forth. So, I don't know, I think that is an issue of ego and issues of competition. And there are men who are socialized into believing that they are superior to women. So there are some men who believe that because they paid what they call bride price, and therefore they should own the woman in all totality. And they don't realize that in many instances I've seen families that have been headed, even though there's a man that have been protected and been leveraged and be taken to the highest level by women. And I remember how Tashalari used to say that he doesn't want a woman that will respect him. Because if you decide to have a woman that only respects you, when the crisis comes to your family, And for example, if you are arrested somewhere, you won't have somebody to protect you because the woman will remain weak, both within the household and outside the household. So for the future of that family and the future of Nigeria, women have proven to be as good and as sound and as efficient as men. And I'm saying this, I haven't had several years of programming about women and religion in the area of management. I've seen this with all emphasis with my advantage. If I was, for example, had the opportunity to be in government, I will appoint women more as well as men in terms of relevant, because the issue should be merit. And there are many meritorious women just as men. And therefore, nobody should be afraid of doing the right thing for the country.
Okay, Prof. Let's look at the issues of religion and culture. Very often, those are the factors that men plead to endeavor to, well, let me not say bring down women. There's the issue of religion, saying that a man and a woman can never be equal. They also plead because of the Nigerian culture, cultural values, that the woman and the man can never be equal. How do you look at that mindset?
Well, fortunately, I've also tried to read the Bible, and I think that I cannot see anywhere in the Bible where such things are said in a very specific way. And I think there are people who misread and misinterpret the Bible. And I want to say with all honesty, because there are also societies in this world that respect women. And therefore, the question is, are they not reading the same Bible?
Even the Muslim, the senator who shut it down at the National Assembly said specifically that in their religion, the woman and the man can never be equal. So it's essentially all religions, Christianity.
In the same place.
Exactly.
Yeah, but we've seen a country like Saudi Arabia that is really driven by religion. Now reversing is, in fact, they have a 10-year development plan that started in 2010. And one of the things they said is that in that plan, and I can share it with you, saying that without women being included in development in many aspects of their life, development will not be possible in Saudi Arabia. So they are changing their views, and that's a country that is very, very highly religious and is a Muslim country. Okay. So I think we should begin to open the way. We shouldn't use religion or culture as a reason to deny women their rights of equality and their rights of equity. Because if you do that, then at the end of the day, Nigeria will eventually lose. I will give examples during the course of this discussion as to how the country loses every year by not including women in development.
Okay, yeah. Prof, we have discussed government including women in development at both the executive, judiciary, and in fact legislative.
Yes.
Now, what role do the women have in positioning themselves in such a way that they can break the glass ceiling? Because women see position there, they can aspire to, but they don't get there. What should the women do?
The number one thing they should do is education. Education. Right from the primary, secondary, women have equal access. They should be given equal access to education as men. And now we talk about girl-child. That's the reason why I'm talking about girl-child education. And I can assure you that if a country promotes girl-child education, the problem related to gender inequality and agency to do things will be eliminated. For example, from what we know from the literature, educated girls in Nigeria and women in Nigeria do as well in terms of development as those we have in England and the UK. So education is a major issue. And when I talk about education, both formal and informal education, ensuring that girls get to the highest level as boys, and I do know that when girls have equal, in fact, my class I teach students, and I know today, as of today, that the girl children I teach are much more serious about learning, about research, about education than the boys. I say this to emphasize at my disposal. And we've had a series of years where I've taught at the University of Benin and Bafina University and at the University of Medical Sciences, where I was vice chancellor. The women were always coming first in class. In fact, the very first class we had at the University of Medical Sciences, where I was vice chancellor, was a woman, and she's doing very well. So I really think that if you ask me a question as to how women can emancipate themselves, it's through personal education, making sure that families focus on girl-child education. As a matter of fact, the World Bank estimates that when you educate a girl, you are educating a whole community, a whole population. But when you educate a boy, you may not be sure that you educate a whole community. You may just be educating the child for him to relocate to Saudi Arabia and do other things other than come to the country. So if the single recommendation, and I don't really want to make too many recommendations, it's education. Because when you educate a child, especially a girl child, then you enable that child to begin to understand the situations, begin to see the glass in it, begin to see the possibilities, and begin to relate more positively to development of this country and contribute to national development. I don't have so many examples. If you go to the Southeast, for example, there are more girls who are even doing better in school than the boys right now. And if you see anywhere I go and I see girls from the Southeast doing things, I'm usually amazed because they are really very good. And really, girl child education is what we need to change that paradigm, to make a paradigm shift in terms of equality with men. And women can, if you put out a contest today and say, let's look for the best person to do this and that, and you put men and women together, women will be more likely to even come out very much more successful than men. And that's my experience.
All right, let's dabble briefly into the political sphere. Very often, especially for a society like Nigeria that is money-centric, so to speak, very often you find out that the women are hardly empowered financially to contest or to compete for some of these positions. We know that whether we like it or not, many of these positions are tied to money. Either you are sponsored or you sponsor yourself or you lobby to get whatever, and you don't lobby with empty hand. The women are hardly empowered enough to be able to stand to contest with men. How do you believe that this can begin to be addressed?
Yes, it's very, very important. Money politics has become the order of the day in Nigeria, and unfortunately, that's not what it ought to be. But unfortunately, we have a country which is driven by money. And then we have also forgotten the second aspect of politics in Nigeria, which is thuggery. Money and thuggery, they tend to go together, and women cannot participate in the level of thuggery that men can actually participate. I remember very clearly where somebody said, just show a woman the nozzle of a gun, he run away from politics. Whereas men can carry guns and move from one place to the other. So quite clearly, what needs to be done is to ensure that we have a proportion of seats in parliament reserved for women. To me, and also, that is what needs to be done. We need for equity for women to get their own representation. Because as it is now, the way politics is done in this country, if we don't have that type of political proportion set out for women, I want to say that we will never have the proportion of women, Nigerian women in parliament and in political representation. We need to protect those who are weak or who are not strong enough to compete in terms of financial resources, to compete in terms of thuggery that we now practice all over the country, in political system in this country. We need to be able to protect them. And one way to do that is to make sure that, and I support women strongly when they're asking for proportion of seats. That bill, which talks about gender bill, asking for specific number of seats for women in parliament, is one of the best and most proactive bills that I've seen this year. And I pray and pray to Almighty God to enable our people in the House of Assembly, National Assembly, to please look into that bill and make sure it is passed. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen. So, Prof, you said in the course of the program, you will tell us how the country loses by not including women in development. Perhaps
yes,
now is the time.
The World Bank, I'm talking from point of view of statistics what have been published in terms of research. The World Bank in 2019 published a paper and estimated that African countries lose about $100 billion every year because of underrepresentation of women in political processes. And because of the large population, Nigeria represents about a fifth of the African population. It simply means that probably Nigeria loses between $20 to $30 billion. And if you transform that into return, that's annually in terms of what we lose. And more specifically, we are really, if you look at what's going on in the country, the high level of corruption, the difficulties we're having with all levels of, whether it be power, whether it be whatever it is, insecurity and so on and so forth, we are simply not presenting our best for political representation and offices in this country. And I do believe that I want to give an example of my Vice Chancellor, University of Benin, and she's doing excellently well. If you have that type of care woman and doing so well in the university and as Vice Chancellor, correcting many of the problems we've had in that university for generations, it simply convinces me that if we put more women in positions, they will be able to be more cost-effective governance and therefore be able to produce more results in terms of economic resources for this country. So strongly, and that was a publication by the World Bank, which was based on modeling. But if we do more specific research in Nigeria, you will find out that even the figures that they are talking about may be underestimate. So clearly, we need to focus on women empowerment in terms of political representation in this country.
All right, Prof. Just in 1 minute, are women supporting one another enough?
Well, the reason that women don't support one another enough is because of the fact that there's been disempowered. They've been given a belief about not believing in themselves over the years. And it will take years of systematic repositioning, governance support to enable women come to reality about their own power to support themselves. I can tell you that women vote more than men. If women decide to vote for a woman president today, the men will run into the bush. They will not have anybody to vote for them because women are the ones doing the voting.
Just the last question.
All right.
Can you please position gender equality in healthcare, how it helps to improve the indices that we have had that is very poor, maternal mortality, infant mortality, and what have you?
Well, basically, there are actually more women health workers and compared to men. If you count the number of nurses, and these are frontline workers. So that if we more systematically engage women, healthcare workers, in terms of development. And then secondly, we should always remember that all indices of health have gender components. And so we must always do, in terms of data aggregation, we should always disaggregate data by the sex or by gender, so that we can know how some of these diseases affect women in comparison to men, and therefore to make specific allocations to protect women. Because if we just give funds, for example, the budget is there and we give that funds to implement health intervention, it's possible that only men and in the society will benefit, because women tend to be invisible. So for all intervention you are doing, you need to do it in this integration and make sure a specific proportion set aside to address the problems of women, the challenges of women.
Thank you very much, Prof. We have been on Cerhi Half Hour and listening to the elucidations by no other than the internationally acclaimed gynecologist, obstetrician, center leader of the Center of Excellence in Reproductive Health Innovation, UNIBEN, Professor Friday Okonofor. Thank you, Prof, for coming to the studio.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson Imogan, for...
You're welcome.
Well, I joined you, not you joining me. Thank you, sir. Former Commissioner for Health, yes. Dr. Wilson Imogan, thank you. Exactly. Thank you very much. That has been Cerhi Half Hour. Join us again for another edition. Very interesting.